Hello and welcome to another episode of the Thought Leadership Podcast and the Speak Your Legacy series. And in this series, we meet the most amazing initiatives that we have had the chance to get to know, especially around the women empowerment, leadership development, and all type of diversity and inclusion initiatives and projects around the world. And today I have the honor to be here together with Dr. Anino Emuwa. And if you go on her LinkedIn and go on social media, you will be so impressed. I don't know how she does it with all the great work that she's doing and all the initiatives that she's creating in the world. Dr. Anino, she is the founder of the 100 Women in Davos. That will be our main conversation today that we are going deeper into. But she's also the author of Leadership Matters and also working as the founder of the African Women CEOs Network, amongst many other things, as her consulting firm called Avandis Consulting. We're going to add all the links below so you can develop more learnings as you go through this journey with us. But make sure to welcome her. Dr. Anino, welcome on the show. I'm so happy to be here with you.
Daria, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. Delighted to be on your podcast. And thank you for inviting me, and hello to everybody who's listening.
Thank you. So I would like to jump right into your work and your mission, because I feel that there's an underlying narrative, not something bigger, that is linking all the work that you do within your consulting firm, as well as in your different initiatives and boards that you are involved in. What is the bigger legacy? What is the bigger mission behind all the work that you do?
Well, there is a mission. The mission, first of all, overall, is that the place of the private sector in driving inclusive growth for the world, every country of the world, is important. And within that, where do I work? I work on two fronts, right? One is advancing gender equality in leadership, because the best chance for organizations, for society, for economies is when we have gender inclusive leadership. I also focus on entrepreneurship, because we need to have those businesses that are starting up to grow and to flourish with innovation and creativity. That is where the growth is going to come from the world. So these are the areas where I focus.
Okay, yes, absolutely. And so how did you come on this path? Have you always wanted to be working on this initiative? Was there something in your career or maybe education that made you more committed to go on this journey?
To be honest, I wouldn't have thought of it right at the very beginning, because where I started from and always wanted to be was at the age of 16, I already knew for some reason that I wanted to be a banker, an investment banker. And once I studied economics in the UK, I then got a job working with Citibank back in my country in Nigeria as a corporate banker. And that's, dealing with the big businesses. I mean, I had a maths background, but I was sort of interested in how finance, which you can't see, right, was driving a business. And so that was the area that I was involved in. And at a very young age, I was, writing credits, for big amounts for big firms. But at the same time, having been a student of economics, what I noticed alongside those big multinational organizations that I was financing and funding for growth, there were smaller businesses, entrepreneurial businesses, right, that weren't receiving money, right, or sufficient financing or funding for their growth. Whereas there were opportunities in the markets, because there were many gaps of products and services that they could fill. And I had the opportunity to live in several African countries. And over the period of years, I did find that gap over and over again. So I used to work with smaller businesses in consulting, but I was more interested in dealing with it on a bigger and global scale. So that's how my work started in terms of trying to fill the gap for smaller businesses to access finance to growth, as a condition and a requirement for economic development.
Right. And did you start in the private sector, or was it more in the non-for-profit sector when you started to be more involved?
Totally private sector, and that's been the area that I've been. I'm fully convinced that the private sector, we need to have the private sector growth to drive drive economies. The not-for-profit is also very important. I'm the trustee. We'll talk about that later, of a not-for-profit, but that is to do with primarily to do with social growth, social development, and helping the underprivileged. But in terms of the big growth and big economic development over the course of history, that is where it's coming from, and is really an important part. So I've always worked in the for-profit sector, and that's really the area where I work in, even though I sit on a major not-for-profit board in the educational sector.
Right. And when it comes to the for-profit sector and the private sector, what have you seen has been the bigger challenges when it comes to the work that you do with inclusion, diversity, entrepreneurship? Do you see that there's a shift happening at the moment, or is it still kind of slow growth?
No, that there is a shift happening. There is a shift happening because if I look over my career, the kinds of initiatives and that organizations and women have today didn't happen in my time when I first started out. And that's interesting because I felt that all of that had been settled by the time I went into the workforce. I come from a family where my mother is a lawyer, right? And having a mother who's a lawyer, by the time I have a mother who's a lawyer who's doing extremely well, for me, that had been settled.
Yes.
I didn't realize that there were still these issues, right? I didn't even realize when I faced these issues. It was only with a daughter growing up, I realized that there was this huge gap. And then I went into the data and I saw what is happening in terms of gender inequality in the workplace, right? Right from entering into jobs for young people, and of course through the career process to the top. And when you just see the numbers, I mean, I'm data, right? And an economist, mathematics. And when you see the data and you see that today, the top CEOs in the world, right, you only have 5% of women. So once you have one woman who's the top CEO, Fortune 500 or whatever it is, you're going to have probably 20 men, right? Or 19 men, right?
Yes.
And those numbers, 19 to 1, are just not sustainable. And we've seen the problems we have in the world. All the research tells us that we will do better if we have a more gender balanced leadership. So that's really where that has come from. But what I have seen, however, is that there are more initiatives. Organizations are more conscious. Before it was the woman on herself finding her path. Now organizations are more conscious. But there's still data that tells us, despite all the successes we see, that sadly it'll take 130 years from where we are to get into gender equality in the business, in the workspace. That is too long. I can't wait for the generation of my daughter, of my daughter's daughter, of my daughter's daughter's daughter, and I can't count how many generations. We can't wait, not just because we are in a hurry as women, we can't wait because the world is in a hurry. We've
Yeah.
seen that where there's more balanced leadership, that those economies, businesses do better. Everybody does better, men
Yeah.
and women.
Yes, absolutely. 130 years and only 5% being in CEO position in those top companies. That indeed sounds like we are in the hurry to make bigger shifts. And this is why the work that you're doing is so important, and also the network that you are creating for so many amazing leaders. And I would love to go a bit deeper and talk about your approach to this. So if we are in the hurry, and if one of the paths that we can go is the private sector, how do we approach it? If you can talk a bit more about your vision in the mission that you do, is it through education or is it through other things, role modeling? What have you seen been working in those in the private sector to improve those numbers?
There are three things that we do. The first thing is that we work with women themselves, right, to give them the certain skills and knowledge. Because if you've had a group, which is not a minority because, women are 50-50, but in terms of, those positions are a minority, that means that women have not been privy to many of the ways in which you rise to the top. Because at the end of the day, to rise to the top is like, it's like a pyramid. There are relatively only few places at the top, right? So there is more to it than just being capable and being competent, right? So
Right.
what we also do is to give women the tools to allow them to get to the top. That's through things like skills development for leadership at that level. There's also access, right? A lot of top positions are not going to be advertised, so it's giving access to women, right? Opening those doors as a community that is recognized. People come to us and say these are certain opportunities. So it's also the access, there's also the visibility. So that's working with women. But we also know that it's not a woman thing. That is one part of it. It's also an institutional or organizational thing. And that's where the diversity, equity, and inclusion piece comes into it. So we work with organizations at the leadership level and how to create diverse and inclusive organizations. Or diversity is a little bit easier, strangely enough, because it's a numbers thing. You can look at the numbers and tell if you're diverse or not, right? You can hire and say we're hiring for diversity, but then to get the benefits you need to be inclusive, and that's the behavioral change within the organization, which has nothing to do with women. It has to do with the organization as itself, right? As the leadership, how do you embrace the diverse talent that you have now recruited, right? So that is the working with the organizations. Then the third piece we do is actually working with policy, which is advocacy and collaboration. So working with organization, letting our views known in terms of the government as well on policy changes that are required to make things happen. So for example, on the UK, in the UK, I'm on the expert advisory group to the Institute of Directors, and we make policy recommendations to the Institute, right, of Directors, and then they then use that for their interactions with the government. So for that's an example. We also collaborate with profit and not-for-profit organizations. For example, we've collaborated with leaders from the UN Women. We are also a UN Women Action UN Women Generation Equality Action Commitment Maker, which is to say that we have put out a commitment which is public about how we are working to increase, to progress leadership for women or gender diversity in leadership. So those are the three pieces. We work with other organizations as well that we do use. So one is the women themselves, two is the DE&I of organizations, and three is collaborations with for-profit and other not-for-profit organizations.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing, Anino. And what I see that as we are doing this series, the Speak Your Legacy series with different non-for-profit and for-profit organizations, education and skills has always been a big one and are offering opportunities to the network visibility. What I would like to go deeper on, which is very unique to your approach, is collaboration. And I know how much of a big part of the work that you do is creating opportunities and creating collaboration between different organizations, for-profit, non-for-profit, like you mentioned, the UN as well. I would love to go deeper and talk about the 100 Women at Davos, which is one of the initiatives that you have created, and that is very much present as we are talking, as we are recording this in the beginning of May. And on the 24th and 25th of May, you will have an event happening in Davos. For the ones listening and watching, I highly advise you have a look at what the amazing program that they are creating. So can we talk a bit more about how did this initiative start?
It started because it started from my first time in Davos, which was, I'm not sure, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And I felt extremely privileged to be able to attend. As a student of economics, I can tell you that as far back as the 80s, I had already heard about the World Economic Forum, and I never imagined I'd find myself there. So here I was, amongst global leaders, heads of state, heads of the biggest organizations of the world, and people working in impact. But what I found immediately was I felt out of place. And I felt out of place because even if the World Economic Forum is one of those places that does a lot to make sure that, it's as inclusive as possible, and that means that about a quarter of the participants are women, which is compared to the real world where a top leadership position is so much smaller. But still, that still tells you that for every woman, there are 3 men, right?
Yeah.
And so you feel that, and you feel that immensely. And I think that we are sort of geared up on conscious bias, right? If you don't know a woman who she is, you oftentimes become invisible. You don't see a woman. If you see a man in a suit, you notice the man in a suit, right? Okay.
Yes.
And so I felt invisible, and I felt I didn't have a voice, even though I was an African woman, and I can't, a tall African woman, you can't miss me. And but I thought about it. This is bigger than me. This is not about just what I'm doing or what I'm feeling. If I'm feeling this, I have no doubt that other women are feeling that as well. Of course, you have the top leaders, who women leaders of the world who are on those stages, right? So they, of course, are heard. People know them. But the other participants, who are majority of the people who are there, right? Women, you didn't really see or feel the presence of women. And so I thought that let us not focus on how few women there are. Let us focus on the women that are there. And that's how I formed the informal community of women who were attending the World Economic Forum. And then I began to understand that there were a lot more people who were outside the World Economic Forum in Davos, a lot more women. And so we grew to become 100 Women at Davos, which is a supportive community of women leaders who are involved in the field of impact and who are attending Davos.
Wow. I love that you talk about this. And as we are recording this morning, every Friday morning, where I am, no matter where I travel for work, I always do She Leads Mastermind, which is a female mastermind, where we meet with the female local entrepreneurs, the female entrepreneurs and leaders and founders here. And this morning we talked about belonging and the fact that how as a woman, even when you are in leadership position, even if you have so much experience stepping into that space, the question of belonging comes up again and again. How do we feel that we belong? How do we feel that we are included within the conversation, at the table, adding value, feeling that we are seen, feeling that we are heard? And I love that you touch upon that it doesn't really matter where. It's really, we can create more belonging. And that's what you have created with the 100 Women at Davos, a feeling of you're coming into this space and there's already space for you to feel seen, heard, supported, to be part of the conversation. So I just want to already thank you for making that experience for the women coming into Davos a feeling of more belonging within the space. And I would love to hear more about how does that look like when it comes to Davos? So let's say that the woman is part of Davos and coming to the 100 Women in Davos. Do you do initiatives when you're there? Or is it mostly about, do you come back to your 3 pillars when it comes to the education, the skills, and the collaboration? Or how does that look like on the field, let's say?
Yes, and I think that what it looks like, and I hope this is what it looks like for women who are coming, is that they know that they have a place. So you're not going to a big conference or a conference center, right? And it's just you and what is happening there. Because most people will be coming for the first time.
Yeah.
Several people have been several times, but most invariably, first or second time. So you know that you have a home, right, of women already. There's a network who we're already interacting with. So women have already approached us. They're already part of this network, interacting, getting to know what is happening. So we start from basic questions. When should I get there? What should I wear? All these things that we people want to know, basic. But then once you before you get there, we have a program which incidentally just went out today. And so our program is we have, first of all, we have a welcome dinner, we have goodbye drinks. We will be at the Equality Lounge, so that is the bit about collaboration, right, as well.
Yes.
We also, we talked about access before. People, because we're recognized, we have been invited, our community has been invited by very many event organizers, right? So we're giving, so these are invitation-only events, and that we are giving the opportunity to women to go to these events that they would not have had opportunity to go to, or they don't even know about. So we have this curated list of events and people who we work with. Now, we are not having our own, shall I say, session on its own per se, for the simple reason that there's so many of these as well, and people are asking us to collaborate. So we have some of our speakers who are going to be speaking at the Female Quotient, which is a 2-day event, and the Female Quotient's Equality Lounge, and I encourage everybody to follow that. Is actually that is where it's going to be our home. Then we have our 100 Women at Davos space, which is a place for us, which our women can gather, so that they can gather informally and know that they have a home in Davos there as well. So we have lots of events that we're part of, but not so much the sessions, because we're participating, we're invited to speak. But it's that people have a virtual home and a physical home with us when they get to Davos.
Amazing. That sounds so great. And I think that a lot of women who are listening and watching this episode, who are curious and have, had Davos on their mind to attend, it might feel much easier now to know that they can just come into a network which is already established and be part of the experience and not having to figure it all out by themselves. And I want to go deeper on this and talk a bit about more the question of, you mentioned that you have thought about that since you were studying economics, when you were, you knew about it already. And Davos has this, for many of us, it has this idea of being very exclusive and very much that there is a conversation happening and that it's hard, like we talk about the belonging again, we're coming back to belonging. In the same time, it's very much open. You can feel that there's an openness to, you can attend, you can join a conversation. In the same time, it's kind of not everyone goes there. So my invitation with this question of inclusivity and diversity and openness and stepping into the space of entrepreneurship and leadership and seeing the visibility in the space, if there is a woman listening to this episode who is a leader, who has some voice, who has something to add to the conversation, how should they approach their first time? Is it just showing up, or is it that they should they prepare themselves? You talk about the preparation even before deciding yes or no if they should join. Should every leader join that? Is there some type of more a question of the right timing, or should they just attend no matter what and be part of the conversation? How would you say?
Thank you. This is an excellent question and very important. First of all, so that everybody understands how it works. Now, Davos is a city which is the highest city in Switzerland, right? And normally Davos holds in January, so it's usually cold. This year it's in May. So that's the physical place. The thing is, the World Economic Forum is a bit like a conference. It's a global gathering of world leaders, which is by invitation only, right? However, in Davos, this place, you have lots of other conferences and events that are around the World Economic Forum that is happening. Now, the World Economic Forum invites its guests, right? And so, unless you're invited for whatever reason, it's not the forum itself is restricted to people who are invited.
Yes.
But I would say that in Davos, I can't say what the numbers are exactly, but you probably have maybe 3 or 4 times as many people who are attending the side events, like any other conference in the world, like COP, like UN General Assembly, like anywhere else in the world. Whenever you have a conference of leaders, like the World Bank spring meetings, you always have these events surrounding the main event. Now, those events surrounding World Economic Forum are accessible really to everybody, right? But the thing is that how would you approach it? To me, you have to approach it with intention, right? That is to say that, and especially because it's not really even accessible, so easily accessible. This isn't like going to a conference in New York or London, right?
Yeah.
So you need to be intentional about it. What do you need? What is it you want to achieve? So I would say, wait until you're ready. Wait until you know the reason why you want to attend it, because it's not physically easily accessible in the first place. It's 2 hours by road from Zurich. Okay. So that's the first thing I'd say. When you know that you have a clear reason why you want to be there, right? Then start exploring it, and there are very many options in terms of what you want to do. In fact, I'd say be careful and don't overcommit yourself when you get there, because it's only 3-4 days, and there's sort of tons and tons of events that you would like to attend.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. And I truly believe in the power of transparency and information. Sometimes, when you see something, you don't know how and it actually works. And if you're listening and watching and you've had it in your mind that actually you can go there and you can attend, you can be part of the conversation, even if you're not invited, if you know if you feel deep inside of yourself that I should be there, I want to be part of the conversation, I have something to add to this, and there's so much value of also listening and learning from the ones who are speaking about the questions of diversity, inclusion, the economics, the world, what's happening in the future of our future, let's say even our present right now. So if you're feeling that, and this is always our inspiration with this podcast episodes and YouTube videos, is that for you to dream bigger, go bigger, and allow yourself to be in the room and step into your leadership, step into your voice, and also listen and also learn and be open and curious, that there is so much power of listening and being in those rooms. And actually, maybe one conversation can change completely the trajectory of your mission, your business, your leadership, and it will open new doors and new pathways in your own brain on how you think about a specific topic. So that's so much value in that. And I would love to ask a final question today that is more about the future of your work and your mission. Where do you see, if you look at the future of leadership, the inclusivity, diversity, as you've been involved in different organizations and also founded different companies and consulting firm, you are in the space, you are in the conversation, you hear what's going on. And I would love to have your point of view and ideas of what are we seeing in the upcoming years with the change that is more towards remote leadership, with the change that is happening all over the world. Can you see, when it comes to the question of especially leadership and women in the space of private sector, what do you imagine, or maybe some type of trend setting of the future of that space? What, if you have anything that you could add on that?
Sure. The first thing is that at the end of the day, we should look at the data, and the data doesn't lie, right? So that is to say that if today we say it'll take 130 years, right?
Yeah.
Then that means next year it should be 129, and the year after 128, right? So if we say we're speeding it up, by the time we get to next year, we should be seeing figures that say, actually, no, it's 90, and the year after it's 60, and the year after it's 30, and that's what we want. So we want an acceleration. So that is why we're making sure that no one organization can do it alone, even the big international organizations. So that is a part of making sure that what we're doing is measurable, right, and change is happening. Within that, within those big, ambitious goals, what are we doing? What are the things we see? One thing that I see, and it's an opportunity, but also of concern, is in technology. Emerging technologies are taking over, and we call them emerging because they've come up in the next few years, but they're taking over our lives. So we're talking about, for example, we're talking about the metaverse, we're talking about blockchain, we're talking about crypto, and of course, even when we talk about NFTs, not just in terms of the having assets, and the reason, and why shouldn't we acquire assets? We should acquire assets as women, right? But also in the creation of those assets, in the creation of ownership of who creates the technology, so that the technology is not just owned, the ownership, but also it represents us. Because what we don't want is for technology, right, to speed up the rate of exclusion. Because the less women go in there, the less we have that sort of equality, right, in technology, in an area that is accelerating. The danger is that it's accelerating the divide rather than closing the divide. You talked about women in tech, and I assure you my presence there with Ayumi is not just as an individual, it's also in terms of our organization. So we are symbolic in our leadership, right? Symbolizing that need to collaborate, right? Because we need to collaborate in order to speed up these issues in leadership in area I'm in, and I do deal with technology, and of course Ayumi in technology as well. So it's an opportunity, however, and women tend to be terrified of it, not because it's scary of its own, but because it's not been a space, right, traditionally that has been welcoming to women, right? It's been geeky and unattractive, and all the sort of negative sort of stereotypes of the space, right? So that is why we're doing what we're doing as well, to make it more accessible to women, and also showing the industry how they can make it more accessible to women as well. So these are some of the areas that it is we see. But really on the financing front, investors are realizing, and there's a push from when people who have the power, right, governments and policymakers, and people who have the money, the private sector, the investors, use that power to make change, then things begin to happen. And so that's why the advocacy piece is very important. And it's happening now. So investors are saying to companies that we want change. We want it to be more inclusive because it actually gets better returns, right?
Yes.
So yes, so we're seeing that kind of change as well. But it's something that needs to be accelerated, and seeing change is not good enough just to see it. We actually have to make sure that we continue to do even more to make sure it accelerates and we get the outcomes we want for the world, and obviously for women.
Yes. Thank you so much for sharing that. And what I love about the approach that you have is to be in this space that is an emerging NFTs, crypto, blockchain is happening right now. And if we are not part of the conversation, we exclude ourselves as women founders, investors. There is a question of creating more feeling of not belonging in that ecosystem. And this is where the women in tech, like you mentioned, that is a big one. And just to make a link for that when it comes to our work is we are very much into visibility with an organization and bringing more female speakers to conferences. And we talk about the women in tech, there's only 10% in some conferences that are actually speakers who are experts within the space of women in tech. And why is this a problem? Is that when we are having less of a diversity on the stage, less of visibility on stage, then we are thinking that there is not this conversation. So more women think that, well, maybe, there's a whole ripple effect of what happens if we don't have more visibility. And I want to link that because it can be from different angles. And for the ones watching and listening, feel about that. Is there a field within that you are in, you want to be more involved, either diversity, inclusion, leadership, and maybe you are in the blockchain space, maybe you are in the NFT, being part of the conversation, stepping into the conversation, like for me, which is very much about, professional speaking, visibility, that is my core message. And Dr. Anino, you're around leadership, around inclusion, diversity. We all have this piece of a puzzle that we can add to the conversation. And if we want to improve that conversation by being in Davos, being in the Women in Tech, being in the UN, sitting at the table, discussing those questions, learning and seeing what's happening with our future, because blockchain is happening, AI is happening, and learning about it and getting curious about how we can be part of that future is perhaps a solution for what you mentioned about the 130 years. Would you say? Could that be a solution?
I absolutely I believe that. And I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
The Web Summit, where I was speaking a few months ago in November, October last year. Now, the Web Summit actually had more than 50% women attendees. Would you believe that? It doesn't happen by chance. It happens because of the intentionality of the founder and the team, right? So first of all, it can happen, right? So you can bring inclusion if you work at it. The second thing was that I was on a panel which was in collaboration with Global Citizen Forum and 100 Women at Davos there at Web Summit. And so there were four of us women. And I walked in at the beginning to get ready to do the prep. And then I just went over to the ladies, came back into the room, and I thought, oh my goodness, I hope we have people here. So we're there backstage. I walked into the room. I couldn't believe it. The room was full. And this was a session on women. The room was completely full. It was amazing. At a tech summit.
Yes.
Right. So can it happen? Of course it can happen. You can't, people say to be her, you have to see her. You have to see women on stages. You have to see women in tech. And in my role, I didn't come with a tech background, but I've entered into the space. And the reason I have, apart from the fact that it's a growth area, right, is to bring that visibility to tell women you don't have to have had a background in tech to be part of this thing that is happening, because it concerns us and we need to be in there.
Yes. The quote that you said right now, to be her, you have to see her, the visibility, that importance. I think to finalize this conversation, I would say that is perhaps the biggest takeaway that I will take from today, and maybe that inspires the ones who are listening, watching this episode, the importance of seeing that it's possible, the importance that with intention we can create organizations, the private sector, that are about inclusion, diversity, that are allowing leadership development, skills, support, collective, all those words that feels better when we come to organization. Those are the organizations we want to be part of. This is the future organizations that are going to shift the future of our daughters and our future of our societies. So I really want to thank you today, Dr. Anino. It has been such a pleasure to hear about your initiative. I'm grateful, and I want to thank you for myself and from everyone who are listening for the amazing work, the amazing mission that you are on, and that is impacting so many leaders and so many women. So thank you for today, and thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you so much, Daria, for having me on your show. And a big hello to all the ladies who are there. And of course, do follow me and on your 100 Women at Davos. We are inclusive and we will be delighted to hear from you.
Thank you, Anina. And we will for sure share all the links below so you can go deeper and check out the work that they're doing in Davos and that Anina is doing with her organization, the different, and as well as the consulting firms. So make sure to check that out. And thank you for listening and watching. Feel free to share what you take away from today and share it with any women or men who might be curious to be part of this conversation, even by listening and being here with us today online, on YouTube, on our podcast. Thank you, and I'll see you next time. Have a beautiful day.